And good evening and welcome to City Focus. I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and tonight I'm absolutely delighted to have a good friend of mine and yours, up from Florida, visiting Southeastern Connecticut, and hot off the golf course with his best round ever.
Yes.
Bill Stanley. So, Bill, welcome.
Hi, Marty. It's great to be with you.
You want to talk a little bit about this round? I saw that post on Facebook. It says, well, I was wondering if you're going to show up.
I'd probably still be over at the 19th hole if I hadn't committed to coming in tonight. But no, it was one of those rounds. If you've ever seen Caddyshack, reminded me a little bit of the Bishop's round before he got struck by lightning. But
not that today.
The putts were falling. The tee shots, for the most part, were staying in or near the fairways. And I didn't lose any balls today and finished with a 79, which is 4 strokes better than my previous best. I played with another friend of ours, Bill Sadie, former mayor of New London, and a new friend, Mike Moretti, who's a very good golfer, about a 4 handicap. Played really well, so I was glad I didn't embarrass myself.
So you weren't the low man in the group?
No, I don't think so. No, this guy was a real good player, and Bill played well too. So it was a lot of fun.
And you played out at Great Neck?
Great Neck Country Club, yes, yep, which is owned by Dave and Ann Mortimer, who bought it out of I guess bankruptcy a number
London Country Club.
Years ago. His former New London Country Club, which went under, predictably, and Dave bought it. Dave and Ann bought it and now run it, and it runs much better now, I would argue, under private ownership than when it was run by a board of directors. And I say that with all due respect to the guys, some of whom were friends of mine who served on the board, but when you've got that many hands in the recipe, it doesn't always make for a good outcome.
But now it's open to the public too, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
Isn't it open to the public now? Or is it just members?
Langley's restaurant is open to the public. Great Neck is still a private club.
Yeah.
But
members can bring guests on.
Oh yes, yeah. In fact, tomorrow morning, I'm playing with Paul Formica, who is a member. Mark Powers, who belongs down at Blackhall, is going to be one of my guests, and my youngest son Billy is going to play with us too. And to be young again, boy, can he hit a golf ball. He outdrives his father by about 70 yards. It's humbling.
Well, I don't golf often or very well, but at the Kiwanis tournament, we have a handful of youngsters that come out there, and they pound the hell out of the ball.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to the long drive, it's always a young man that's winning. It's just
oh sure,
by leaps and bounds.
And when you see where the sign is out where they've hit the long drive, it's embarrassing because it's 100 yards past where you hit your drive. But it's a great game. It's fickle. It can bolster your spirits one day and bring you to your knees the next day. And I'll just tell you, 8 days ago, I substituted for a friend of mine, Bull Durham, in the Tuesday Night League, which is 9 holes of golf. And for 9 holes, I shot a 56, which, if you double it over 18 holes, would have been 112. I don't know that I would have done that badly over 18 holes, but it was one of the worst rounds of golf I've ever had. And then today, a 79, go figure. And tomorrow I'll probably be 20 strokes higher than I was today. So,
well, it's as you say, but it's humbling, but it's fascinating. I don't think folks that either don't play or don't watch good players. I mean, it's really it's not just a stroll around pastures. I mean, you've got to be physically fit and mentally strong.
Mark Twain called it a good walk spoiled, and depending on how you're playing, it can be just that. But I've been doing it for 55 years, And there have been times when I've played so badly, I've thought about quitting or at least taking time off. And then days like today, you think, aha, I finally figured it out. But tomorrow will probably be a very different experience.
Well, bask in the glow of a terrific round, and this is terrific.
Well,
I'm happy for you.
I'll enjoy it tonight, and when I get home, I might open up a single malt and celebrate.
How often do you play?
3 or 4 times a week, whether it's here or down in Florida. And I'll play with a regular group of guys on Saturday morning. Sundays I play with my girlfriend Karen. This weekend we're playing in the Jack and Jill tournament with Dan and Sandy Glennie, our good friends, who we travel with and enjoy golfing with. And other times I'll bring guests. Other times I'll go up to Hartford or the greater Hartford area and play up there. You must know Chris Healy,
Yep.
The former Republican state chair.
He's been a guest here once.
Okay, well, Chris and I go back to the late 80s when we toiled in the Capitol Press Room together. He was the bureau chief for the Torrington Register newspaper. I was the bureau chief for the Day. And we've remained friends over the years, and he invited me up to a tournament at Wethersfield Country Club later this month. So we're going to play with a couple of friends of ours. And it's always good to get out and play other courses sometimes.
Now, when you're in this area, do you stay at Great Neck, or do you play any of the other courses in the region?
I play at Great Neck most of the time, but I expect I'll be at your tournament over at Chenecasset. And I've played in a couple of tournaments this year up at Norwich. A good friend of mine, Ed Donovan, has had me up to Mohegan Sun at Portapog a couple of times. And so, yeah, variety's the spice of life. If you could.
When my father was alive, he played a lot of golf, and he liked the Blackwall, which I've never been on. And he said that was like the best course in Southeastern
It's a
Connecticut.
great track. It's a really, really nice golf course. And it's challenging. It's more up and down than Great Neck is. Great Neck, I enjoy walking because it's, for the most part, a level course. It's in pristine condition. The groundskeeping crew there does a great job. The pro shop does a great job. Butch Langley runs the restaurant with his sister Bev.
And they do a terrific job there.
And I think the work that they do at the restaurant was one of the big differences. When it was New London Country Club, the food service and the beverage service were horrible. They were so bad that the question you would ask at the end of a round was, where do you want to go to get a drink, or where do you want to go to get lunch, because you weren't going to stay there and do it. Now everybody stays because Langley's is a quality place. They do a great job.
They do a lot of events there and functions.
Every time you go in there, there's a wedding reception, a funeral reception, a bar mitzvah, an anniversary celebration.
Reunions, whatever it may be.
Everything, yeah. And of course that generates revenue for the club, which helps keep the dues down, and that explains why they've got 450 members there now. Back in the old days at New London Country Club, they'd have killed to get that kind of enrollment.
Yeah, well, it was significantly more expensive. I think it was a bit more of a professionals club, then. I mean, you had doctors, lawyers.
I don't remember exactly how much it was. I actually joined New London Country Club a couple of years before it went under. And as I recall, Paul Suprin, my good friend,
Yep.
who had actually been a longtime member at New London, he and I went out and joined at Fox Hop Yard out in East Haddam.
Yes.
Which is
That's a tough course.
a tough course, good course, and back then it was in great condition, as it is now that they've gone back to exclusively private. But it was too far away. It was about a 40-minute drive, 35, 40 minutes to get out there. New London Country Club was running an initiative to get members in, and if you joined on or before Labor Day for $1,000, you had full club privileges for the rest of that year, and the $1,000 would be applied toward your annual dues the following year. Well, it was too good to pass up, and of course it was a lot closer to home. Well, after one full year back at New London Country Club, at the end of the season they called a general membership meeting, and they announced that they were not going to make any more budget cuts, that they were not going to increase dues, and that they were not going to apply any assessments. That had been one of the things that drove some of the members away. You'd get half or three-quarters of the way through the season, and you'd get socked with a $600 or $700 or $800 assessment. And they promised that all of those things were going away. Well, Paul Suprin was a career banker and raised his hand to ask a question. He said, since the end of the season, we've lost 50 members, which conservatively, each one amounts to about $5,000 in annual revenue, which leaves you with a $250,000 hole in your budget. What are you going to do about that? Well, after the board members conferred, the chairman of the board finally said, Paul, why do you always have to be so negative? That's when Paul and I knew the end was near, and sure enough, later that year, they went under. But as I said,
hadn't they did a big capital program as well, just before the...
that was one of the things that really bollocks things up. They had a major project out on the 10th hole where they kind of rebuilt the pond out there. And my understanding is, I don't know this firsthand, my understanding was that it, like a typical state of Connecticut project, it went way behind schedule and way over budget. And the club never really recovered from that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Do you go up to the Travelers to watch? Or down in Florida, do you watch the?
No, not so much anymore. In fact, I had an opportunity to go to the Honda Classic down at PGA National, and I was playing that day, so I didn't go down there. I love watching these guys in person. I mean, so that you get a firsthand view of how truly gifted they are. I mean, these guys hit golf balls 307. Rory McIlroy hit a tee shot on the 18th hole in the final round up at Cromwell this year, 380 yards. I mean,
he's not a big guy.
He's about 5'7", but you know, he's very muscular. He kills the ball off the tee. We went up and saw when John Daly was playing there. You know, you'd be standing 200 yards downwind from the tee box, and the ball would still be rising when he hit it. And the accuracy with which they play is just, it's great to watch in person, but you miss an awful lot. And really, the best place to watch a golf tournament is in your living room, because you know, you watch this guy who will chip in from 110 yards, and you'll see this other guy hit out of a bunker and hole out, and you see it all as it's happening. Yeah. But it's a real treat, you know, to go up one day and watch the pros.
I enjoy going up, and what I'm amazed by is how they get out of trouble. I mean, you or I make a bad shot, and it's an extra stroke on your card, or two, or maybe three.
Sure.
Where these guys have hit a lousy tee shot, and they're saving par, or maybe even getting birdies. Rarely are you seeing these guys, you know, taking bogeys. I mean, it's really got to be one heck of a course.
If you watch these guys, and sometimes, you know, for instance, if I'm watching the Ryder Cup, obviously I'm rooting for the Americans against the foreign players. And so a foreign player might hit the ball into a bunker, or into deep rough, or behind a tree. As you say, Marty, they are so good. It doesn't matter at all to them. If they hit the ball in the bunker, they might as well be in the middle of the fairway. They, whether it's a fairway bunker or one around the greens, the skill level is such that
Now they go in the water and they still they par.
you almost expect them to walk on water to go out and retrieve the ball. They're so good. But even if they lose a stroke by hitting it in the water, or hitting it out of bounds, and some of these guys, when you're hitting a ball 350 yards, and you don't hit it straight, you can really get yourself into some trouble. But like you say, they recover. It seems miraculous, but it's really more the rule than the exception.
Yeah. Have you played the course at Cromwell?
I have, yes, several times. I went up last year. I was invited by our friend David Precca to go up and play in the Builders Association tournament. I was supposed to play this year, but unfortunately had to attend a funeral that same day, so I wasn't able to go up. But it's a lot of fun to play. Very challenging, but it's a fun course to play. And it's neat when you're on the same course as the professionals have been. You get an even greater appreciation for how good they are when you try to play half as well as they do.
Yeah, well, it's fun. You know, one of the things that I enjoy, and we were talking before we came on the air, that I've always enjoyed your writing when you're going back to your days at the day.
Yes, thank you.
And since you've retired, you seem to have picked up your pen because you're on Facebook almost daily.
Right.
Writing about golf, sports, politics, about your favorite teams and how they're doing or not doing.
Sure.
And our teams generally are not the same. So, but what I admire is that your candor. I mean, for instance, the Yankees are struggling to, as of now anyway, the season in the bottom of the Eastern Division, although they'd be in first over in the Central Division. I'm not saying that means a hell of a lot.
Yeah, but if I had wings, I could fly. You know, they're not in the Central Division.
But you don't pull punches in terms of when you're writing about them that you're a pure homer, that it's other people's fault that the Yankees are where they are. It's the Yankees' fault, or the manager, or they're not playing well, or the injuries, or whatever it may be. But
they're not. From top to bottom, they're not functioning, and it starts with the owner, and it goes down to the general manager, the players, even the conditioning, the strength and conditioning staff. The Yankees, year after year after year after year, have more injuries than any team in baseball. And Domingo Germán just missed a start. His shoulder is bothering him. Now, I think we all know that baseball players today are not as dedicated as baseball players years
this
ago.
is not the 1950
who played
Dodgers and Yankees.
Yeah, who played for maybe $40,000 a year, and if they had an injury, they rubbed it in the dirt and they played through it. It was not unusual to see guys, whether they were utilities players or superstars, playing anywhere from 150 to 162 games a year. Nobody does that anymore. You know, guy goes 0 for 5 one night, the manager gives him the next day off. And when the guy is like Giancarlo Stanton and he's being paid $32 million this year, you give him a day off. That's a lot of money.
Sure is.
For a guy who's supposed to be hitting home runs. He's hit, what, a dozen this year?
Well,
he's batting .210.
He has not met expectations for New York, I don't think, since he's been there.
About the only guy that they've brought in who has met expectations has been Garrett Cole, the starting pitcher, who's unfortunately, a number of his great starts have been wasted because the Yankees can't hit. They're the second worst hitting team in Major League Baseball, but they're the second highest paid team in Major League Baseball. So
who, the Mets or the Dodgers?
the Mets are the highest paid team, or yeah, they have the largest payroll. The Dodgers, I think, are 5th or 6th, and are the only one of the top 6 teams with the 6 largest payrolls that's in first place. You've got the Mets are below 500, and they're out of the pennant race. The Yankees are in last place. They're the second highest
They're
paid
still
team.
close enough to make a run.
It's not going to happen.
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, the Red Sox. I'm a Boston guy.
Yeah.
And they're 2 games ahead of New York, but I don't necessarily feel that they're really in the running.
I was really impressed with the Orioles when they beat the Yankees 2 out of 3. The Orioles, we got so used to seeing them in the basement, and I mean way down in the basement. 35 games out of first place, and now
that's at the All-Star break.
Yeah, they used to be terrible, and now they've got great young talent. Most of it's homegrown, the way the Yankees used to do.
I think it's good for baseball, though. I think it's good.
I agree. I agree with
Baltimore and Tampa, they're up at the top. I think it's
and it's good for baseball that Tampa, even though they've hit a tough stretch recently and they've fallen back into second place, the start they got off to, what did they win their first 14 games? They're one of the lowest paid teams in baseball, but they own the Yankees. I mean, they beat the Yankees. They beat them again last night. At one point, their pitcher had retired 14 batters in a row for the Yankees. They can't hit. It's very frustrating to watch.
That's not the norm for New York. I mean, New York is the Yankees. That is, if anything, they're known as a hitting team.
More for hitting home runs. I mean, their home run production, even though it's off a little bit this season because Judge is out and Stanton's not hitting, they hit a lot of home runs, but they historically have not been a high average team.
Yeah. But it's interesting, you mentioned ownership earlier, and although the ownership of the Yankees is still in the Steinbrenner family, it's certainly not the same as it was under George.
Well,
in terms of the demands or expectations for success.
Well, George Steinbrenner would have fired Aaron Boone as the manager 2 years ago. He certainly wouldn't have renewed his contract for the next 3 years with a 4th-year option. One of my friends on Facebook wrote today that Hal Steinbrenner is considered a nice guy, unlike his father, who used to fire managers mercilessly. And I wrote back and said, yes, and also won 10 pennants and 6 World Series. Since Hal Steinbrenner took over, I think 15 years ago, the Yankees have won 1 pennant and 1 World Series. And the apple didn't just fall far from the tree, it fell into a different time zone. There is no resemblance between Hal Steinbrenner and George Steinbrenner, other than their last name.
What's your take on the rule changes with baseball?
I like them, I really do. They've sped up the game. They've cut, on average, about a half an hour off the duration of the game.
So it's down to about 2.5 hours then?
Yeah, even less sometimes. And it's great to see the game without the pitcher routinely stepping off the mound and taking off his glove and rubbing up the ball, and without the batter stepping out of the batter's box and adjusting his glove and his pads. And it moves the game along, and the game really needed that because it was, I love baseball, but it was getting really, really hard to watch. And I'm glad they got rid of the shift. because that generates more offense, generates more runs, generates more excitement, which translates into more fans and more money.
Now, what about, I'm more of a traditionalist.
Yeah.
You put a shift on,
Yeah.
I'm hit it that way, hit it the opposite field.
When the guy 60 feet and 6 inches away from you is throwing the ball at 100 miles an hour, it's not as easy to hit the ball where you want to hit it. You're lucky if you get the bat on the ball at all, which is one of the interesting differences between a sport like tennis or golf and baseball. You know, golf, you're hitting a ball that's lying there perfectly still, and everybody's got to be quiet. You know, you got the people with the signs of quiet. Meanwhile, a guy with a round bat is going to hit a round baseball being thrown at him from 60 feet away, at going 100 miles an hour and moving in who knows what direction it's going to go in, might even be coming up at his head. And he's got 50,000 fans behind him screaming at the top of their lungs, and they can still manage to do it. But that could be why somebody who has a 30% success rate at getting a hit is considered doing well, as is the case in baseball. You know, a golfer who hits his shot well 30% of the time is not going to make much money.
No, that's for sure. Speaking of that, because I wanted to touch on this, and that is the PGA and the is it the LIV?
Live, yeah.
They've sort of kissed and made up, or what's going
Yeah,
on there?
unfortunately.
I saw, I think it was today, that Tiger Woods is getting on the board of the PGA.
Yes, yeah, which I think is great. In my mind, Tiger's stock and Rory McIlroy's stock went way up when both of them turned down literally hundreds of millions of dollars. Is that right? Yeah. And they could have gone and played for Live Golf and walked away from the PGA. Both of them, I think, care too much about their legacy and care too much about tradition and the history and the tradition of the PGA to walk away. And a lot of other players didn't walk away. Some, unfortunately, did. I was really disappointed in Phil Mickelson, who used to be one of my favorite players because we're both left-handed.
You play golf left-handed?
I do. Throw left-handed, right-handed, eat right-handed. I'm all mixed up. But I was disappointed in the guys who were really good golfers. Dustin Johnson, Bryson DeChambeau, guys like that who defected from the PGA and took the easy money. They only play, there's no cut. In other words, if you enter a tournament, no matter how poorly you play, you get to play from start to finish. In a PGA tournament, you don't play 54 holes as they do in the Live tournaments. You play 72. And if after 36 holes you haven't played well enough, you don't make the cut. You're disqualified, and you don't make any money.
How do they handle the caddies with that, by the way? Do you know? Because I was discussing that with some friends, and I don't know. I mean, the caddies must get paid if.
Oh yeah, they get paid, and I think it's traditional. I don't know exactly what the percentage is, but if the guy they're caddying for wins, $1 million or $2 million, he gets a bigger cut.
I think it's a percentage, but my question is more along the line of the guy who does not make the cut. And if he doesn't get paid, the caddy ought to be getting paid for his 2 days' work.
The caddy's going to get paid, but unlike the guy who caddies for a guy who does make the cut, he's not going to get a percentage of the winnings because there aren't any winnings.
Yeah, I don't know if there was a minimum or if there's a.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I don't know how that works.
I only caddied a couple of times in my life, and that was years ago when I was in college. Caddied for a guy that I used to work with at the Norwich Housing Authority. And he was a career painter at the Housing Authority, and we had a mutual affection for golf, and he asked if I wanted a caddy for him one day, and he was an older guy, as far as I was concerned back then. You know, I was 20 years old, and he was in his late 50s, but boy, he was a terrific player, and it was fun to watch him play, because back then I was terrible.
Yeah, that I caddied just a handful of times as a kid, but one time I remembered I caddied for my father. He played at the Yale course. I don't know if you ever played that course.
I played it once, yeah.
Yeah, that's a monster of a course. It just
Apparently, I heard today from Mike Moretti, in fact, one of the guys I played with today, that Yale is going to close the course for a couple of years, and they're going to invest many millions of dollars
Major
into upgrading it, I guess. So,
I mean, some of the traps in that course are so deep there were, you know, ladders and stairways to climb out of them.
let me tell you about deep traps. Karen and I and the Glennies had the good fortune to go over to Scotland and Ireland last year, right after the Open Championship, in fact. And we did not get to play the St. Andrews Old Course, but we did play, one of the courses we played was Carnoustie, which is, they have also played the Open Championship there.
Yep.
And I'm 6'3", my friend Dan is 6'4", and he wound up in a bunker, and we took a picture of it. We both stood in the bunker, and the top of the bunker was easily 3 feet above us. Now, he did get out on his first try. I was lucky enough to avoid it, but those are some deep bunkers over there. The other thing that was interesting about it, Marty, was that we went through a service to get the tee times for us at Carnoustie and Jubilee and St. Andrew's New Course and some of the others. And we were thrilled that we got onto Carnoustie, except we had a 4:30 tee time. And at first I was angry about it. I said, there's no way we're going to be able to get in 18 holes if we tee off at 4:30. Well, unbeknownst to me, the sun doesn't go down over there at that time in the summer.
Further up in the.
We finished our round just before 9:30. There's still plenty of daylight. We missed our dinner reservations, but we easily got in the 18 holes. It didn't get dark until 10:30 that night.
Yeah, I've been to Norway in the summer, and that was like that there because it's much further up. Yeah, it kind of throws you off though, because you're up at 10 o'clock, and it's like maybe it might be your bedtime where you'd be having dinner at that hour, because it just things are
right. Yeah, it throws you off a little bit. Big adjustment.
Yeah. So how do you enjoy links golf?
I love links golf. In fact, before today, one of the best scores I had gotten an 83 on two courses, one of which was the links course. The non-links course was Goodwin Park up in Hartford, which is a municipal course in the south end of Hartford, right next to Wethersfield Town Line. The other was at Truro Highlands up on the Cape, which is a links course, and I got an 83 there. It's a great course. It's rugged, and it's a little like playing in Scotland. There's fescue all over the place. And Truro Highlands is right on the Atlantic Ocean, and a group of us from the day used to go up there and play. And I think it was the sixth hole is on a bluff probably 100 feet above the Atlantic Ocean. And what we would do after we hit our tee shots is we would hit a ceremonial ball out toward the ocean. And of course it was always windy there. And if the wind was blowing in, you could hit the ball as hard as you want and you wouldn't reach the water. But if the wind was at your back, you'd hit it halfway to Ireland. It was, but it's a neat little course that before long I'd like to get back up there again and have another crack at it.
Well, I'll tell you, you've had some quite an experiences between where you live and around here and travel. It sounds like you have played some pretty interesting courses and some of the courses that the big boys play, and that's got to be exciting.
It is. It's a lot of fun. It's a game that you can play. God willing, you can play into your 90s. Mike was telling me about a fellow he plays with who's 80 years old and still shoots in the 70s, which is remarkable. And occasionally you'll hear Kevin Shea in the pro shop over at Great Neck does a great job of letting people know when somebody has a good round. They'll probably send something out about my round today, but he'll, whether they're men or women, whether their best score ever is a 95 or a 68, Kevin will send the word out so that the entire club can celebrate. And there's such great camaraderie over there. It's terrific. But
Jimmy O'Neill still play out there?
Jimmy O'Neill is a great player out there, and he's I don't know how old Jim is. I know he's older than I am, but he's an excellent player and competes well. I've seen Jim's name come across the wire from Kevin Shea a few times. He's won tournaments or finished high in some of the tournaments. So, and he's been a long time member out there. But I played in a Saturday morning group. I still do, but a few years ago, a couple of the guys in our group, one guy, Mel Goldblatt, who is now deceased, but back then was, I think, 88 or 89, and was still playing. And one day, Ulysses Hammond, who's about my age, Ulysses and I played Mel Goldblatt, who's in his late 80s, and another fellow who was, I think, 80. And they beat the daylights out of us. And fortunately, we weren't playing for high stakes, so we only lost a couple of bucks. But we lost a lot more in pride. I mean, and but if you take relatively good care of yourself, and even if you don't, I mean, some guys just play in carts all the time. Occasionally, if we're in a hurry or if it's really, really hot out, discretion being the better part of valor, it's not a good idea to go out there and tempt heat stroke because, you might be out on the 13th or 14th hole far away from the clubhouse, and if you go down there, it's going to be a while before anybody gets there to
Now,
help you out.
Does Tommy Viverito still play out there? He was a club champ years and years ago for a period, and
I don't know.
he used to work with O'Neill and with Legion, and it was baseball. And
Yeah. I know the name, but I don't know him. With so many members there now,
I'm sure you don't know everybody out there.
I see a lot of guys whose faces I recognize, and everyone's friendly out there. But I don't play with. There are a lot of guys who are much better than me. I went to college with Jimmy Stefanski and Rob Renahan, who were regulars out there, and are regularly in the 70s, much better players than I am.
Now, you mentioned Ulysses Hammond. I just want to change topics a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Because and I have the utmost respect for him. He's a
Yes.
terrific guy.
He is.
And I think he has stepped into this job he's got with down at State Pier.
The Port
with the Port
Authority.
Authority.
Yes.
I just wonder what is he thinking to step into quicksand down there.
Well,
I haven't discussed this with him. I mean, I'm
Sure.
upfront. I'm just an observation.
sure. I think a lot of us had the same reaction. Ulysses is one of my very best friends. We golf together a lot, and, although not as much anymore. Now that he's given up retirement and is working full time. I've asked him a couple of times, you think he can sneak out on a Wednesday? No, he says, you got to work. So I think, well, knowing Ulysses likes a challenge and welcomes it. But I wondered about it too, given the history of the Port Authority in general and this project specifically down at State Pier. However, from the Port Authority standpoint, it was a stroke of genius getting a guy with an impeccable reputation who, if you were going to look back over the first 23 years of this century and identify the most valuable citizen in this region, it would be Ulysses. He has chaired virtually every nonprofit board there is, the hospital, the United Way,
Martin Luther King.
the Martin Luther King
Scholarships.
Foundation, and not been a figurehead, been a hands-on, fully engaged chairman of the board, who ran good board meetings, understands governance, and never had anything that he ever did called into question. He served on the Community Foundation Board, the Chelsea Groton Board of Directors, and just done a great job, did a great job for Connecticut College when he was up there. And so whoever came up with the idea to bring him in as executive director had a brilliant idea. I think Ulysses gives them a little bit more credibility. And I think that he has probably toned down or maybe blunted some of the real harsh criticism, much of which is deserved, that the Port Authority came in for. Now, appropriately enough, timing being everything, just this past Sunday, Ulysses took a group of us, friends, who have always been asking him about how the job is going and everything, and he said, I'll bring you down there sometime. So he brought us into his trailer office, and I'll tell you, there's nothing plush about it. Where he gave us a presentation and answered all our questions. And then he took us out onto the site. And Marty, I've got to tell you, if you remember what the State Pier used to look like, and I don't know if you've been down there and seen it since a lot of the work they've done.
Not since its transition. Not up close. I mean, I've looked down on it from the top of the Mohegan. That's as close as I've been.
Okay, well, you're going to be amazed, and you don't have a full appreciation for how vast an area it is that has been filled in between the two previous piers. And what this is going to do, and they have already delivered some of the towers that there are 3 of them that will go one on top of the other when they bring these things out into the ocean and place them on the ocean floor for these giant wind turbines. And I just think that it's a project that's beginning finally to come into fruition. And it's taken a long time. There have been a lot of missteps, as I said, typical of a state of Connecticut project. You know, it's gone way over budget. Not all of that has been a result of mismanagement, which predated his.
Oh yeah,
This is
David
not-
Corus, and then you had Scott Bates. Bates was the chair of the Port Authority for a number of years.
I think Ulysses' role was to come in and sort of clean up the mess. And I think he's done a good job at that. It hasn't been easy. I mean, when he's had to go up and appear before the bonding commission, he's gotten some really tough questioning from this area. I know Holly Cheeseman is a member of the State Bonding Commission in her capacity as ranking member of the Finance Committee. And she asked David Corus if he would swear on his children's heads that he would not come in and ask for more money after this. And then they came in and asked for more money. So I think she likes and respects Ulysses, and I think the feeling is mutual there. But
She's a sharp gal.
very sharp, very sharp. And East Lyme and Salem are fortunate to have her. I think she has a very good relationship with Governor Lamont, has participated in bill signings in the governor's office, because she is one of those increasingly rare politicians who is capable of working with the other side of the aisle without, standing down on their principles. There are some issues that Holly Cheeseman and Democrats on the other side of the political aisle are never going to agree on, but it's never personal. And she and some of the other people, I think, in our legislative delegation have shown an ability to reach across the aisle and get things done.
Yeah. I miss, you mentioned you're going to be playing tomorrow with Paul Formica, right?
Yes,
There's
right.
a guy who I had the utmost respect
Me
for.
too, me too.
Terrific state senator. I think it was a big loss for our region with him not seeking re-election, but I can understand there's a wear and tear on that, and he's
Really is, and particularly at a time when politics and government in general, particularly at the federal level and at the national level, is so polarized right now. Paul was liked and very well respected by both parties and both chambers up in Hartford, but for someone who was still running a business, the Flanders Fish Market and Restaurant, and who has children and grandchildren, and has a lovely woman that he wants to spend time with, having to drive back and forth to Hartford. And I know it's supposed to be a part-time job. It's not. It's a full-time job. My father was a state senator. And even back then, when they didn't have a legislative office building and they didn't have aides, and in fact, he said the vote that he was proudest of during his time in the legislature was voting against annual legislative sessions, because he was a believer in the old adage that no man's life or property is safe when the legislature is in session. In fact, I took him up to Hartford when he went back for the toga dinner that the Senate would have each year, and it happened to fall on the same night that they opened the legislative office building. And so they were having a big reception, and so my dad was there for that. And we met Judd Everhart, who was the bureau chief for Associated Press then. I introduced him to my dad. So Judd pulled out his pad and he said, "Well, Senator," he said, "what do you think of the Legislative Office Building?" And he looked around at the teak and the granite and the marble and the brass, and he said, "It reminds me of Rome, just before the fall," which didn't go over well with Irving Stolberg, who was the Speaker of the House and who I think really pushed hard for the Legislative Office Building. But when my dad was in the state Senate, his office was his desk. Only the senior leaders of the legislature had their own office.
That's some clear thinking. I mean, it's funny. I've talked with Bruce Reinhardt, former chief of police
Sure.
in London, about politics. We enjoy sharing thoughts, but he would say that his father, just kind of old school clear thinking, who would always vote, but really didn't care what the results were, because the day after election day he would have to go to work.
Right.
Makes no difference who wins. I have to go to work.
Yeah.
And that's kind of was his philosophy. I mean, just I think that's where your father was. Was a gem. He was clear thinking.
Yeah. He was sometimes wrong, but never in doubt. He had eulogized a friend of his and said that of him. I said, if he would pass before he did, and he eulogized you, he'd say the same thing. But you mentioned Bruce Reinhardt. Bruce was the chief of police for a while I was covering the police beat, and a good man. Always talked about that thin blue line that would, I think it was a thin blue line that separated civilization from anarchy. And
I think we're seeing that.
yeah, and the thin blue line is thinner now than it ever was. There have been a lot of stories about how difficult it is for police departments to fill their ranks because in this time of defund the police, which is absolutely one of the dumbest ideas that's ever been advanced in modern civilization, and second guessing of police and their every move during their shift being recorded, right out of Orwell. And I understand having body cameras are just as important for weeding out bad cops as it is verifying the accounts of good cops. So I suppose it's a good thing, but I sure wouldn't want to have a body camera on me while I was doing my job, every day. Police work is so hard, and there are so many reasons why there are so few people going into police work. Out in Illinois, they are now considering having non-citizens being hired as police officers.
Non-citizens.
Non-citizens. That's a pretty scary precedent in my mind. But Chicago in particular, and Illinois in general, I think, are the greatest examples of lawless society that.
It's frightening. Hate to say this, Bill, but our time has expired here. We've just whipped through here.
Time flies when you have fun.
I want to thank you for carving out an hour to come on City
I'm
Focus.
happy to do it anytime, Marty. Thank you.
And
I'll look forward to the Kiwanis tournament.
I just happen to have a form with
Oh,
me.
well,